I don't know if you call it betrayed. I think like things happened and our relationship just got into a weird, ugly place.
Celebrity friends, Kim Kardashian, obviously my best friend. I definitely live a different lifestyle than other people.
Like,
What are you
seriously?
what are you talking
no,
about?
Shut up. Let me finish. You are the one person that I thought I
Listen to
trusted.
me.
In 1999, Jonathan Cheban launched Command PR with no major clients, no backing, just instinct and a contact list. By the mid-2000s, he was already inside Kim Kardashian's world, years before the cameras, the billion-dollar deals, the cultural takeover. He watched every crisis and reinvention unfold from the inside. 2 divorces, multiple scandals, a complete identity shift into Foodgod. But Kim's name never left his mouth. Not to tabloids, rivals, or anyone. For someone that close, silence is never accidental. So what is Foodgod finally revealing now? Join us as we uncover what Jonathan Cheban has been hiding all along. What changed and remained for the man behind the machine. To understand Jonathan Cheban and why he finally decided to open up, you have to go back to a version of Hollywood that most people have already forgotten. The late 1990s celebrity economy ran on access. It was not enough to be talented or even famous. What mattered was visibility in the right rooms, at the right events, photographed by the right photographers, next to the right people. And the architects of that visibility were not the celebrities themselves. They were the fixers, the public relations operators who understood that fame was not just something that happened to people, it was something that got manufactured, maintained, and strategically deployed. And Jonathan Cheban was one of the best at it. Jonathan Cheban built his career inside that machinery. In 1999, he co-founded Command PR, a firm that quickly distinguished itself from the standard Hollywood press office operation. Command PR was not reactive. It did not wait for journalists to call and then manage the damage. It was proactive, connected, and operating at the intersection of celebrity culture and nightlife in a way that made it indispensable to a very specific kind of client. If a rising star needed to be photographed at a particular restaurant, or seen entering a specific venue on a night when the right people would notice, Command PR made it happen. Jonathan understood that visibility was a currency, and he was in the business of spending it on behalf of other people. By the early 2000s, his firm had accumulated a client list that carried genuine weight inside the industry. He was not a peripheral figure operating at the edges of celebrity culture. He was embedded inside it, trusted by people whose careers depended on discretion and results. And it was in that environment that he first met a young woman who was working as a closet organizer and personal stylist, still years away from the moment that would transform her into the most commercially powerful celebrity on the planet. Kim Kardashian was not yet famous when they became friends. She was connected, stylish, and clearly understood something intuitive about image and aspiration. But the cameras had not found her yet, and the empire had not been built. Jonathan has said in multiple interviews that the friendship formed in that period was genuinely personal, not strategic. They were not 2 people calculating what the other could offer. They were 2 people who operated in the same world, shared a similar instinct for how fame and visibility worked, and simply got along. That foundation matters, because everything that came after it was built on top of something real, and that distinction would eventually explain why the friendship outlasted everything and everyone around it. When Keeping Up with the Kardashians premiered on E! In October 2007, it did something television had rarely managed before. It introduced an entire family as a single cultural unit and made audiences feel like they were watching something that was simultaneously completely constructed and completely genuine. Viewers understood on some level that they were watching a produced reality show, but the emotional responses it generated were real. People cared about these characters. They argued about them. They followed them obsessively. And within that first season, Jonathan Cheban appeared on screen for the first time as a recurring presence in Kim's world. His role in those early episodes did not require explanation. He was simply there, comfortable and familiar, the way only a long-term friend can appear on camera. He was not performing friendship for the audience. He already had one. And that authenticity read differently than the relationships that were clearly being constructed around the production. Audiences noticed, even if they could not quite articulate what they were noticing. In 2010, the friendship moved into new territory. Jonathan co-produced The Spin Crowd, a reality series on E! That followed the daily operations of Command PR. Kim Kardashian was an executive producer on the project. It was a small production by the standards of what the Kardashian universe would eventually generate, but it was significant for a specific reason. It proved that Jonathan was not simply a passenger in Kim's world. He was a collaborator. He had content worth building a show around, a firm with genuine story potential, and a relationship with Kim that was professional as well as personal. The Spin Crowd ran for one season and did not break through into the ratings territory of the flagship show. But it established something important about Jonathan's positioning that would shape everything that followed. Through the early 2010s, as Kim's profile expanded at a pace that nobody in the entertainment industry had quite seen before, Jonathan remained a constant. He appeared on Kourtney and Kim Take New York. He was present at the events that generated the biggest media coverage. He was in the photographs, he was in the conversations, and he maintained a careful balance throughout all of it. He was visible enough to be recognized, but never positioned himself in a way that competed with or overshadowed the person he was closest to. That balance was not accidental. Jonathan understood the architecture of celebrity better than most people in his position, and he applied that understanding to his own public persona with a level of discipline that often goes unacknowledged. During this same period, the business around Kim was transforming into something without clear precedent. The Kim Kardashian Hollywood mobile game launched in 2014 and generated over $200 million in revenue within its first year of release. KKW Beauty launched in 2017 and sold out completely within hours of its debut. Skims, her shapewear brand, launched in 2019 and was later valued at over $4 billion. In 2021, Forbes named Kim Kardashian a billionaire. She was no longer a celebrity who had become a brand. She was a diversified business entity with global reach, a law student with an active prison reform practice, and one of the most studied examples of personal branding in the history of commerce. And through every single one of those chapters, Jonathan Cheban was still there. But what nobody knew yet was the price he was quietly paying to stay in that position, and what it was slowly doing to his own identity. The night Kanye gave him a new name. The story of how Jonathan Cheban became Foodgod has been told in pieces across various interviews over the years, but the full version of it reveals something far more deliberate than the casual origin story suggests. The nickname itself arrived spontaneously, and that part is well documented. Jonathan was at Sugar Factory, a restaurant that had become something of a Kardashian family institution in New York, known for theatrical presentations and a maximalist approach to dining. He was eating a burger where the cheese was made entirely from white chocolate, the kind of combination that sounds absurd and somehow turns out to be exactly the thing a person with Jonathan's specific relationship to food would seek out and celebrate publicly. Kanye West was present, and in the way Kanye West has always had of making declarations that immediately carry cultural authority inside his specific universe, he called across the table, "Yo, Foodgod." The name landed instantly. It spread through the group. It attached itself to Jonathan with the natural ease that only truly accurate nicknames ever manage. And in the Kardashian world, where Kanye's cultural authority during that period was nearly absolute, a name he used became a name that permanently stuck. But what happened after the name arrived is where the real story begins. Because Jonathan did not simply accept a nickname. He saw something in it that would change everything. He looked at the landscape of what the Kardashian network was already occupying. Fashion, covered extensively by Kim and Kendall. Beauty, dominated by Kylie and Kim. Fitness and lifestyle, owned by Khloe. He looked at what nobody in that orbit was seriously claiming. And he found food. Not food criticism in the traditional sense. Not the Michelin star review culture or the long-form culinary journalism world. Something faster, more visual, more emotionally immediate. The experience of eating something extraordinary and making the people watching feel like they were at the table alongside him. In 2019, he made it official. Jonathan Cheban legally changed his name to Foodgod. Not as a stage name, not as a brand identifier that existed separately from his legal identity. He changed it on paper, officially, with the full weight of a legal proceeding behind it. The decision attracted immediate mockery. Critics argued it was desperate, performative, and underlined everything shallow about celebrity-adjacent fame culture. What the critics missed entirely was the strategy. Jonathan was not performing commitment to the brand. He was demonstrating it in a way that could not be walked back. And in the attention economy, a genuinely irreversible gesture signals a level of conviction that audiences respond to even when they cannot explain why. His social media following grew consistently after the rebrand. He began posting daily from restaurants across New York, Miami, Los Angeles, and eventually internationally. His content was not polished in the way of professional food media. It was fast, reactive, and built around genuine enthusiasm rather than critical distance. Audiences responded to the authenticity of someone who clearly loved food in a personal and almost irrational way, rather than someone performing expertise at it from a professional distance. A Discovery Plus show called Foodgod gave him a global platform to extend the brand into long-form content. His Foodgod fresh meal delivery service brought the brand directly into the domestic market. By 2024, his estimated net worth reached approximately $5 million and continued to grow through brand partnerships, appearances, and content deals. None of it was built on Kim Kardashian's infrastructure. It was built through relentless daily content, brand discipline, and a personal investment in the subject that audiences could immediately tell was authentic rather than manufactured. But the rebrand was not only about business, it was about something Jonathan had started to feel deeply by that point in his career. Being defined primarily through your relationship with someone else, regardless of how genuine that relationship actually is, carries a specific psychological weight. People do not ask who you are. They ask how you know her. And after enough years of that question, it starts to feel like an erasure of everything you were before the connection existed and everything you built alongside it. Foodgod was his answer to that erosion. A lane that was entirely his own. A category nobody could explain by pointing at someone else. And the legal name change was his way of making the commitment permanent rather than provisional. But building a brand was only half of what Jonathan was carrying during those years, because the other half, the part he never talked about publicly, was far more complicated. And it had everything to do with what he had silently witnessed inside the most famous family on Earth. 2 decades of silence and what he finally said. Here is the thing about Jonathan Cheban that the tabloid coverage has always missed. He was present for every chapter of Kim Kardashian's story that the world considers defining. He was around before the 2007 leak that reshaped Kim's entire public identity and forced the family into a decision about transparency versus privacy that changed reality television permanently. He was there through the 72-day marriage to Kris Humphries in 2011, which generated global mockery and genuine internal family pain simultaneously. He was present through the marriage to Kanye West, through the creative highs and the very public mental health crisis and eventual deterioration that preceded their divorce in 2022. He watched Kim begin studying law in 2019, pass the baby bar exam on her fourth attempt in 2021, and begin taking on actual prison reform cases while simultaneously running a billion-dollar business empire. And through all of that, across all of those chapters, not one significant story was ever traced back to Jonathan Cheban. Not a quote to a tabloid, not an anonymous source described as a close friend, not a tell-all interview, not a book proposal. The entire celebrity media ecosystem runs almost entirely on information that leaks out of intimate circles around famous people, former assistants, ex-partners, childhood friends who feel overlooked. Everyone eventually talks. Jonathan never did. Not once. In 20-plus years. And when you understand what he was actually sitting on all that time, the silence becomes the most extraordinary part of the entire story. Keeping Up with the Kardashians ran for 20 seasons across 14 years, making it one of the longest-running reality franchises in television history. During that entire run, Jonathan appeared across multiple seasons and spin-offs without ever becoming the subject of a falling out, a public disagreement, or a story that required either side to issue a statement. In an industry where even the most carefully managed relationships eventually produce some kind of public friction, the complete absence of any such moment between Jonathan and Kim across that entire span is not normal. It is not luck either. It is the result of two people who understood from the very beginning what the friendship was worth and made consistent daily decisions to protect it over and over again. The people closest to Kim have acknowledged this repeatedly, and in terms that make clear it is never taken for granted. Jonathan has described it himself in interviews without making it sound heroic. He does not frame the loyalty as sacrifice. He frames it as the simplest possible extension of what the friendship actually is. You do not sell out the people you genuinely care about. That is the full explanation he has ever offered. And it carries the ring of something felt rather than strategically constructed. What he has started saying more openly in recent years paints a clearer picture of what those decades actually felt like from the inside. He has acknowledged the psychological weight of being publicly defined through your proximity to someone else, no matter how real the relationship underneath that proximity is. He has talked about the Foodgod transition as identity survival as much as creative expression. The need to be known for something that belonged entirely to him, that could not be explained as a function of being near someone more famous. Food gave him that territory. And the legal name change was the line he drew to make the commitment undeniable. On the friendship itself, he has been more candid than he once allowed himself to be. He has described Kim as one of the most disciplined and strategically intelligent people he has ever observed up close. Not in a flattering way designed for an audience. In the specific way of someone who has watched another person operate under conditions that would have dismantled most people, and come out sharper and more focused on the other side every single time. He has talked about her capacity for focus, her ability to absorb information about entirely new industries and apply it almost immediately, and her underlying consistency as a person beneath all of the transformation the world has publicly watched her undergo. He has also said, in terms that carry the plainness of something simply true, that she makes him laugh. That she is the same person with him now that she was in the early 2000s before any of the machinery existed around her. That when they spend time together, which happens less frequently now, given that he lives primarily between Miami and New York, while she is based in Los Angeles, it does not feel like a meeting between two public figures managing their relationship for an outside audience. It feels like two people who have known each other long enough to stop pretending about anything at all. He mentioned in a recent interview that the only real obstacle to seeing her more often is the sheer operational scale of what surrounds her now. Seeing Kim Kardashian in person requires security coordination, scheduling logistics, and route planning to manage the attention she generates in any public space. But when that coordination happens, the day itself tends to look the same as it always did. They eat, they talk, they find the restaurant nobody else knows about yet and sit in it for 3 hours. And for those 3 hours, the billion-dollar brand, the legal name change, the Discovery Plus show, the bar exam, and the prison reform cases all exist somewhere outside the table they are sitting at. There is a specific kind of pressure that comes with being the person closest to someone at that level of fame, and Jonathan has started talking about it honestly. Every relationship inside that circle operates under scrutiny that most people will never experience in their entire lives. The financial incentives to breach trust are enormous and permanent. Tabloids do not stop calling. The offers to tell the insider version of a story do not disappear simply because you declined them once. They come back in different forms, from different directions, framed differently each time to make the compromise feel smaller than it is. Jonathan navigated that pressure for over 2 decades without a single documented lapse. And the people who have worked closely with both him and Kim have noted that his reliability in that regard was never something that had to be managed or monitored. It was simply who he was. He has also opened up about the years when the public perception of him was at its most reductive. The period when the prevailing narrative around him was almost entirely about proximity, when being described as Kim's best friend felt less like a recognition of the friendship and more like a substitution for everything else he was doing. He has said those years required a particular kind of patience, the kind that comes from knowing what you are building even when the people watching cannot see it yet. He kept running the firm. He kept developing content. He kept showing up at events and in photographs and on television without losing sight of the longer arc he was moving along. And eventually, the Foodgod identity gave the world a different frame for understanding him, one that he had built entirely on his own terms. What the media has consistently gotten wrong about Jonathan Cheban is the framing. Coverage has always positioned him as a person who exists in relation to Kim Kardashian rather than alongside her. That distinction sounds small. It is actually enormous. His firm was already running before the friendship became public. His reputation inside the industry was built on his own work. The friendship amplified what he was doing and gave it a scale it would not otherwise have reached as quickly. But it did not create him. And the Foodgod brand is entirely his own construction, built in a lane Kim Kardashian has never occupied and never tried to. So, what do you think? Is Jonathan Cheban the most underrated figure in the entire Kardashian story, or is there still more to this friendship that neither of them has fully explained? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.